Welcome back, it's great to see you. Today I want to talk about my own personal evolution in the bonsai hobby, as well as do an update video because it is winter of 2014. So I got interested in bonsai about my sophomore year in high school, and it was just kind of happenstance. I had been working in the landscaping industry as summer jobs. You know how you do when you're in high school, you have a summer job. Well, mine was on a landscaping and mowing crew and a paver crew for a landscape company. And maybe even before then, my grandfather growing up used to have a really large garden, and I used to really enjoy going out and helping him work in his garden and pull weeds, harvest the fruits, vegetables, what have you. And I think that maybe got me at the very ground level interested in bonsai. But then once I started working for this landscape company, I would be out and I would see, we would have to go dig a bush out of somebody's yard, and I would see the root base and I'd see the root flare, and it always intrigued me because it looked really muscled, really gnarly, and I was really attracted to that. And so I started doing a little bit of studying. I went to a library and checked out a few books. I found out that in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm originally from, that there was a bonsai club, and there just so happened to be at the Franklin Park Conservatory, a bonsai show. So I went to this bonsai show, and I was walking through it, and some of the trees looked good, and some of the trees were okay, and I came upon this ficus, and this ficus just left me in awe. It really spoke to my heart and my soul when I was looking at this tree. And I remember the tree was probably this big around at the base. I mean, it was wider than I was, and it came up, and it was just as perfect could be in my eye back then, and even still today. I remember this tree, and I just remember staring at that thing had to have been 30 minutes, just losing myself in the tree. And I think that really was what did it for me. That's when I really got the virus. From there, I would go to a local nursery in town that had, the little tiny Chinese import bonsais, the little cheap things that everybody kind of tends to start out with that ends up killing it in the beginning. And they had books there, which was great. And I bought almost every single book on the subject that I could find from there, as well as a few other outlets. And I did all kind of reading and reading and reading and reading. And finally, I finally bit the bullet and got my first tree. It was a juniper. Kind of cliche, everybody does it, but this is clear back in 93, 94. Really wasn't a whole lot available back then that I even had knowledge of, so I bought it from this local nursery, and of course kept it inside, killed the tree. It didn't really keep me from pursuing it any further. I wanted actually to understand why, as well as continue my knowledge with it, and it just kind of caught my attention. And I'm always a person that has a thought process of why did this happen and what can I do to make it better. So I read and I read and I read and I read and I studied and I read and I looked at pictures and I checked books out at the library, and at that point in time I didn't buy any more trees. And I didn't buy any trees for about 3 years after I'd killed that one. So now we're at my senior year of high school, and after I'd had enough of that as far as reading and looking at natural trees and looking at things and learning really the basics. You start with the nabari and you move up from there, and that's how you look. Everybody looks at a tree from the nabari up, and just branch placements and different species. And I was looking through these books figuring, oh, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that, and I kind of went bonsai crazy at that point in time. And I went and I bought a tree, and it was a Chinese elm this time, and it was another import tree. It had a trunk maybe, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch to an inch, and I was able to keep that one alive for about 3 months, so I thought I was doing something. And I kind of got onto this bandwagon that I see a lot of people getting on the same bandwagon. We get, I guess, bonsai drunk, where we buy hundreds and hundreds of trees. We're buying all these trees, this $20 tree here, $15 tree there, You know, I'd go into Walmart or somewhere like that. Actually, up there it's a Myers, but you know, I'd see one and I'd buy it, and I'd buy this one, I'd buy that one, I'd buy this one, and before you knew it, I had 40 trees, and they were all, you know, $10, $20 trees, and I had a little picnic bench on the setup in our backyard, and it was just completely covered with trees. And I think it's a big mistake that a lot of people make. And I think we all make it. Maybe that's part of the learning process with bonsai. But I got bonsai drunk is what I'm going to call it. And I just bought tons and tons of little trees. And most of them I was able to keep alive, and some of them I wasn't, but it didn't stop me. And then I started going to nurseries, and I started looking around. I remember I saw Colin Lewis's book, and I bought it, and I started reading his first book. It was actually Colin Lewis and Neil Sutherland wrote this book together. And they were talking about looking for nursery stock as possible bonsai material. So I would go every Saturday. I would get paid Friday. I'd go every Saturday to the nursery, and I'd go through it, and I would find a tree. So then not only did I have all these benches full, I had all the concrete pad full of all these little trees in these 5-gallon pots, and these, you know, Chinese cheap plastic pots from these import trees and everything that I had. And at that point in time, I'd graduated high school and started going to work, and I was working for an insurance company at the time, and it went on like this for a few years, and then finally I got an opportunity to transfer to South Carolina, which is where I'm at now. A lot of the trees that I had up there didn't or shouldn't be in the climate that's here in South Carolina, so I ended up getting rid of most of them. I kept a few of them because I just had to have some trees. And I moved down to South Carolina with about 20 trees. Once I got down here, I found a club. At the time there was a local club. I joined the club. They had some really great speakers that came through, and that's when bonsai really opened up to me. At that point in time I was opened up to it. But once I got down here to South Carolina, it opened up to me. And what I mean by that is I was very fortunate to be a part of this club, because I was able to meet Arthur Jura, and he brought a couple of trees in. One of them is a quince, and it to this day I was just awestruck with the quince. Kind of like the same situation where I was up there with that ficus, and that really lit the fire again for me. And I started seeing these larger trees. See, up in Ohio I didn't really have a whole lot of exposure except for that one show at the Franklin Park Conservatory. Down here there were a lot of other actual bonsai hobbyists and semi-professionals that were in the group, and they had larger trees. And I kind of got the philosophy, and a couple of them took me under their wing, and I developed the philosophy of, instead of having 20 mediocre trees, have one really good tree. And focus all your attention on that one tree, because eventually that one tree will be something great versus these 20 things that will always be mediocre because they were mediocre to begin with. And I started developing that kind of mindset towards bonsai. And I met a gentleman, his name's John Green. He owns Green Thumb Bonsai in Greenville, South Carolina. Really great friend, and he really gave me my opportunity to really learn a lot about bonsai. He bought out a bonsai nursery in California, and they brought 9 semi-tractor trailer loads of trees here to South Carolina. And John, his son, myself, and one other gentleman named Jimmy basically unloaded all these trees and laid them out and put them in irrigation system. They were this like 1/4-inch tube with a stake, and we lined all these trees up, and they were all in 5-gallon containers, and some of them were in wood flats. And 9 semi-truck trailer loads full of these trees. And that's when I was really starting to get into the design aspects, and looking at the tree and seeing what the tree's potential is, letting the tree tell me what it wants to be. That was something I kind of came up with on my own. I always look at a tree, instead of saying, what do I want this tree to be? I say, what is this tree telling me it wants to be? And I just would sit down and I'd look at it, and I'd spin it around and around and around, and I would see different things, and I would always look for the best possible outcome that the tree's showing me. And that's kind of how I got started. And I had a pickup truck at the time, and John said, well, why don't you take a couple of these trees home and style them and take them out of the pot and repot them, and then bring them back. And so I did that for 2.5, 3 years straight, and I would take anywhere from 20 to 40 trees home with me at a time. And I'm talking trees in 5-gallon pots that had, you know, 2-3 inch trunks on them. And there was a bunch of them that I did that I killed, but there's a bunch of them that I did that lived. And that's kind of how I learned the techniques of root pruning and the different needs of each individual species of tree. And that's really how my journey began, getting serious into the hobby. And at all this time as well, I ended up finding John Naka's books, and I got his and Amy Liang's and a bunch of other folks' books, and I would still constantly read, and I'd be getting a lot of inspiration. And always in the back of my mind, I was always thinking of, you know, what trees I wanted to end up having in my collections. And some things happened, lost a job, ended up having to sell one collection that I had brought down from Ohio. Through John, I started gathering another collection, and I would also go to a lot of the local nurseries and still look for nursery materials as well. Lost a job again back in 2008, had to sell that collection. And I kind of took a break at that point in time and really sat back and thought seriously about even continuing the hobby. But I still had my books, and I still always went back to the books, and by that time I was able to find some online resources as well and really study. But at this point in time I had probably studied in actually hands-on experience, had 10 years worth, and it was more of a self-apprenticeship situation, because, you know, I was getting 20 to 40 trees every weekend for 2 or 3 years straight in 5-gallon pots, and they were really root bound, and they were really in really poor shape, to be quite honest. But I would take them home, and I would take them out of the pot, and I would remove the soil. I would trim the roots. I would select roots for nabari, select the branches and everything, repot them with bonsai soil, and then that following weekend I would load the entire back of my little Toyota pickup truck up and take it back to John and load up another load and take it home. And about every 80 trees worth of load, I'd find one that really spoke to me. And in John's appreciation for what I was doing for him, he'd say, you know what, why don't you take that one home and keep it alive for a while. And so that started a really great relationship between us, and really helped me a lot with my bonsai hobby, as well as what I'm doing today, to be able to show you guys the techniques that I use and the things that I've developed over time. I've probably killed more trees than most people should, but you know, my baptism was a baptism by fire. I didn't have the abilities or the opportunities to go to Japan or go study under a master or a, you know, someone along those calibers. So I had to do it all myself, and that's kind of where I got to that point, and was able to find a great job, got married, have children, have a house, have a stable situation now. And that's when this whole YouTube channel really started, was about 2 years after I had decided to get really serious into the hobby. Up till then I was just kind of a grunt, doing work, styling, learning the basics. I'd read the basics, I'd studied the basics. In Ohio it was kind of my introduction and beginning, but then when I got down here it really started getting into the actual styling and the maintenance and everything that I show you guys on all these videos. And up till about a year ago, I was still kind of bonsai drunk in a way, where I would see these different types of trees and different species of trees that I didn't have, or I would happen upon something and have an opportunity, like my pyracantha. A drunk driver ran over a 50-year-old grove of those that were at a local park, and they were digging them out, replacing them with something else, and I just happened to drive by and say, hey, what are you guys doing with those? And that's how I got my pyracantha there. We're throwing them away. Well, can I have one? Sure, take whatever you want. And that's the one I chose. So that's the only one I could fit in my truck, because the bush was ginormous at the time and really didn't have any tools. But I developed the philosophy at that point in time that I'd rather not only focus on a couple really great trees versus a whole bunch of mediocre trees, but I've decided that I want to focus on a couple key species of trees, and then also have a few others to piddle around with as well. So my horizon is still expanding in that aspect, but I really wanted to focus on the trees that really sang to me or speak to my heart personally. So I've decided that what I'm going to do is use Chinese elm, or any elm species for that matter, maple species. Those are going to be my two main tree species that I want to work with. I'm still going to have a few others, like I've always wanted a nice Storia, I've always wanted a Pyracantha, or I've wanted a few flowering type species. I would love to get a crabapple because they have those type of trees just I really like, and they remind me of my childhood and things like that. So those will always be with me. And then a few pine trees. Really haven't had a lot of success with pine trees myself personally until about 5 years ago. I really started to take the time and go to a lot of workshops. Went to a workshop with Hiroshi Yamaji. That was a very, very eye-opening workshop for me in the realm of pine trees and what can be done with pine trees. He taught me a lot in the little bit of time that he spent with me, and it was very valuable for me to do that. So any of you guys thinking about doing a workshop with a true bonsai professional, if you ever get the opportunity, don't hesitate, because there are a lot of things that you will learn that you wouldn't normally learn by books or other things. I mean, these guys have been doing it for thousands of years. They have a lot of little techniques that they may not tell you speaking wise, but if you pay attention to what they're doing, you'll see these techniques, and that's how you get them, is by visual look more so than them saying, now what I'm going to do here is this, this, this. He basically told, where do you want this apex to be? And I said, it was way over here. I'd say, I'd like to have it back over here so it would give it balance and bring the tree into perspective. And he said, I agree. Tools. And he just did it. He didn't say, this is what I'm going to do. He just said, tools. And he did it. And by watching, that's how I learned a technique to take an entire apex of a pine tree that's over here, that's twice the size of your thumb, and bend it around and bring it over so it's in balance with the rest of the tree. I never thought it was possible, but he did it right in front of me. So I've learned a lot by watching those type of caliber people as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be focusing mainly on the maple species, Japanese maple, trident maple. I'd like to find an Acer campestral, which is a hedge maple. I've got that nice chalk bark maple out there as well, so I got a lot of those maples. And I also wanted to start working a lot with local species or native species to the area. So I've got the chalk bark maple, I've got an American elm. There's some other native American elms that I would like to obtain as well. I've always liked the Chinese elms. I've still got the brim style Chinese elm, and a couple more surprises once we get outside. So enough chit chat, enough boring you guys with my story of how I became from start to now. Let's go outside and check out some of these trees. Stay tuned. Alright, so here's the chalk bark maple this year in spring. You can see that the branching has really started to get, I guess, as ramified as it can be for this species of tree. It's got really long extension growth. Even though it's been in this pot for 3 going on 4 years, the distance between the nodes is still pretty long. But we're going to continue to work with it because it's a maple and I love it. And here is the Sangukaku. A year later, after the graft's taken, you can see there's number 1 branch, number 2 branch. This branch was actually a little bit thicker and growing a little stronger than this one was. And if you look at them now, I've gotten this one a little bit thicker now than this one. What my plan is, and you see I cut it, that's why, as I cut it back. And then of course it back butted all these branches, and this one is still continuing to, I'm letting it grow. I want to get this one will probably have 1 more season of unchecked growth, and I'm probably going to cut back to this branch here and develop this bottom branch from here. So it'll be that thick, and then this will be the next phase of this branch, or possibly this one back here. Not sure yet. I might be able to get it, if I can get a front branch to pop from down here, or maybe here, we may think about doing something else, but that's the game plan at the moment. And of course this one here is going to be where I go with this branch. This one's going to be cut here. I'm going to start developing ramification through this one. I'm going to bring this one down and over. As you can see, it's got buds here, a bud that's popped there, there's another dormant bud here, this one, this one, this one, so that's going to be the next step on that one. And you can kind of see the rest. You can see where I screwed up on this, left the wire on too much, and it scarred this whole top up, and I can't stand that, and I'm not really too fond of this whole situation here as well, so I'm thinking of maybe cutting it back to here, from here to here, so just down here at an angle, and maybe working with something over here like this as the new apex. I'm not 100% sure exactly what I'm going to do with it just yet, but that'll be another video. Next we've got the cork bark elm, the one that we're doing the broom style. Just kind of let it do its thing. It's got a lot of low branching and whatnot. We're going to have to eliminate some of these low branches here and do some selections on that tree this year for its next phase in the broom style. But you can see it's doing doing quite nice this year. Here's the American elm. I think that finally I've gotten my transition, and here you can see it to where it's a more realistic transition from where the cut site is to the new apex area. So I'm contemplating cutting this either here or up here, and that'll be the final top of the tree. But we'll look at that one more in depth. As you can see, if you just let it extend growth, it goes up there a ways. That gives me that nice transitional effect that we were looking for to get that a more realistic taper in that tree. This one's coming along really nice. I'm happy with it so far. The Nabari's, well, can't really see it too much because it's covered in moss, but it's constantly improving itself as well. Really happy with that tree. This one here seemed to have bounced back this year, which I'm kind of happy to say, because this is the one we did that drastic restyling on, and it didn't react too well. I got one bud that popped here, and this is all 1 year's growth on this tree to try to develop a new apex. But kind of like the movement in this tree now. It kind of does the informal upright. I may have to repot it at just a slight angle. My thought is to go ahead and let this tree just grow unchecked this next growing season. I'm going to do some carving work down in here. Hopefully I can get another bud to pop around here. If not, that's okay, because we got this one here. So this will be number 1 branch, which needs to be addressed now. We need to get this wired down a little bit lower, at a little bit different angle than it's at currently. Get this one a little bit different angle than it's at currently, somewhere around in this locale. And then you know, we've got other options for new or secondary apexes and whatnot as this tree progresses as well. Here's the red pine. As you can see, it's doubled in its bud production in 1 year. I've got 3 buds coming out of here now instead of just the 1. We're just going to continue letting this one grow unchecked. I'm just going to feed it and water the heck out of it this next growing season. And this canopy will probably double in size again, but what that's going to do is that's going to set buds. That's going to set back budding. These are all, if you see these little ribs here, those are dormant buds, or dormant bud sites I should say, all along here where needles used to be. And I'm hoping as long as I let this tree just explode with growth, I am going to have to cut back a little bit on the top to balance the energy in this tree. That's about all I'm going to do. But I'm hoping to get a little bit of back budding on this tree this year. And if so, then we'll have something to cut back to. And if not, then we'll look at other options for this tree. Moving along. As you can see, this bench here is completely barren now. And there's a reason for that. And I'm thinking about doing I've got a local nursery here that I found some really nice Japanese maples, a couple different species, nothing real major, nothing with big giant trunks like this. Stuff with maybe trunks about that size. I'm thinking about doing a few, maybe 5 to 7 smaller Japanese maples over there, and doing an individual styling video on each one, and then when I get to the point where it's ready to start its ramification, maybe doing an auction, just auctioning it off on eBay, which will help me get a little bit more capital together for some of these other trees that I'm planning on getting here in the near future. This is that Kashima, and like I said, this tree is apically dominant, and what has happened, if you look up here, you can see that branch is dead. This one's died back. That one there has died way back. This one's died back. All these upper branches, like I knew they would, they died back. However, if you look closely, we got a dormant bud here, dormant bud down there, up there at that one you've got dormant buds popping. So although they did die back a considerable amount, that's probably, I don't know what, 6-8 inches, there's still some buds that have decided to pop. Like this one, for instance, this branch died all the way back clear to here. Now I've got this one coming up, and that one's kind of an important branch. You can see it died back to here as well. That's kind of an important branch because it's right there in the front, and that's the one that's doing the healing over here on this tree. So I'm glad it decided to stay alive. It's also got some buds here in the back that have popped. So here's the first trident maple. I've got nice whips. Look at this giant whip here on this one, clear back into my pyracantha. That extends way out there. It's very high on the tree, so it's going to have a lot of energy to it, and I'm going to end up using this one to thread graft through here this year. And then there's a dormant bud right back here that I'm going to cut this thing back to if this takes the following year. I need to start thinking about some back branching back here in the back. Other than this one, I'd like to have maybe one more back branch back here, so I'm going to probably use this whip here to thread graft one to the rear. Here's where I've cut back to apex wise. I cut that back and saved this for the apex, but I'm thinking of possibly cutting back to even clear back to here, possibly. So eliminating all that and going clear back to here. Not real sure yet, but that's something we'll look at in another video. This is the Sharp's Pygmy. We didn't really actually have any kind of winter this year. It went straight from fall to snow. Just decimated the leaves in one night. November the 1st, we ended up having a huge cold front come through here, and wiped out pretty much all these trees. I mean, you can even see on this tree, these maples didn't like it at all. Did the same thing with this maple here, only it didn't drop. It dropped its leaves where the other ones have retained it. They're alive and they're okay, so we're cool there. Just I didn't get any fall color this year, which kind of stunk. This is a trident maple, the nursery trident maple. We're going to continue to let this one do its thing. We're getting some nice transitional thickness out of this. We're going to let this grow and check one more year, and then we'll cut it way back into here somewhere, and then develop another apex so we can continue that taper. I mean, it's got good taper now, but this needs to be about twice as thick as it is now before we do our chop. You can see it just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. So, next up, pyracantha. I started to expose the nabari a little bit on this thing now, because it's starting to get to that phase where we need to start thinking about final front placement and some different wiring and some different things based on the nabari. And as you can see, it's got a decent nabari. Gets even better the deeper you go. I'm probably going to have to repot this tree this year because it's drying out even in the fall now. About every 2 days it's needing watered again, which is telling me that it's just full of roots in there. I mean, this tree's been in this growing container now for 4 years. So I'm gonna probably have to repot this next year, not this coming year, but the following year. It'll be 5 years in that pot. But it's doing well. I mean, it looks kind of sad right now because the birds have come and eat all the berries off of it and robbed it. We've got a couple things here and there. These spiders that build these houses in here and overwinter themselves. But You know, nothing looks its best in the winter, so, well, I say that, but some trees look their best in the winter when they have proper branch placement. So next up is the this is a fire glow. I plan on doing some branch removal on this. You see, when I did my chops last year, I got a lot of back budding all over the place on this thing. So there's, you can see where I had some things marked to cut off, and there's branches in the back that have sprouted out below those cut marks, so now I can cut that back without the threat of it dying back any further down the trunk. Squirrels have been at it again this year already. There, and they nicked me right here also on this tree. I saw that the other day. I've decided that instead of making my mortal enemies the squirrels, maybe trying to do something else to keep them away, which I've got corn that I've put out for them. Looks like they've been chewing on it a little bit already. So hopefully they'll find this corn and eat this corn instead of my trees. Now, some of you noticed that I haven't shown my hornbeam. This bench is bare. There's a lot of space on this bench that's no longer being used. The back bench back here has no trees on it. And a couple reasons why. Number one is this Chinese elm here. I got this thing, and it's just an old gnarly tree. As you can see, I'm pretty much determined that this is the new apex here, and I'm trying to get it was clear out here. I'm bending it up for it to become the future apex of this tree. This is going to be the front of the tree that I've found. I've got kind of, you can see it's got nice wiggle. It goes that way, that way, that way, that way. I'm probably going to air layer this big trunk here. It'll have a big nasty scar here for a while, but while I'm letting this grow and letting this branch grow and getting some other back branching and letting it grow freely, that'll close up pretty quickly. The big deal is this back trunk. I mean, the trunk on this thing's just massive. You can see it up against next to my hand. It's just enormous. But I'm going to have to eliminate this big trunk here, which means I'm going to have to probably do a air layer on it as well. And I've got these lower branches here to act as a back branch, or maybe even a lower side branch. If I use, like, maybe this is the front. So there's going to be some time-consuming consideration given to this tree, and what I've done is I just put a screw in a dead part up here using a turnbuckle to bring this branch up. This is the second year it's been out of the ground. It was one of the trees at the nursery that I'm going to get some black pines and whatnot, and I've been told there's some black pines that have trunks like this out there as well as trident maples with giant enormous trunks on them like this as well. And that's one of the reasons I got rid of a couple of the trees. There's some folks that were interested in some of the other trees that I had, and that's why they ended up going in favor of this elm and the one right behind it, which is a Stewartia. This is actually the back of the tree. Let's move around to the front of the tree. Like I said, I always wanted a Stewartia because I think it's got a full four-season ability. It's got the bark and the nice thin traceries of twig in the winter, and then in the spring it flowers, and sometimes in the summer they flower, just depending on which kind of Stewartia it is. But that's the biggest trunked Stewartia bonsai I've ever seen, personally, here in the United States. So I mean, it's massive. Again, it's, you know, trunks that big around. So anyway, that's where we are out here this year. Just wanted to do this quickly and show you some of the new trees that I have on the bench, and some more areas that we're going to be adding as we go. Okay, now that you've seen what's going on outside with my benches and what's to come for 2015, there's a couple other things that aren't here yet that I want to let you know that are going to be here. Back to working with specific species via maples. I found a couple seedling hedge maples available. I'm going to have to grow them. I'm going to probably have to grow one from scratch because they're very hard to find here in America. Acer campestre, also known as a hedge maple, they're very prolific. They're almost a weed over in Europe, but they're really hard to find here for some reason. But they do grow fast, so I'm hoping in the next 4 to 5 years I'll have one that's got about 3 or 4 inch trunk on it. If I do what I'm intending to do, ends up working out. I will be growing it in the ground, and maybe that was a good one to start a growing bonsai trees in the ground series. There's some things that I want to try, and hopefully they'll work out to my benefit. Also, if you noticed, I've got the red pine out there still, but my little black pine's gone. That was, believe it or not, even more so than the hawthorn. That one was probably one of the harder trees to let go. I really didn't want to let it go, but in order to get some of these other trees like the Arakawa and a couple others that I'm going to have, I had to. I have to pay for these trees some way, somehow. So a few of the trees that you don't see on the bench anymore are going to be going towards getting these other species that I'm wanting to focus on. And a couple of them that you see out on the bench now as well. So I'm going to be able to have the opportunity to go to a field of a bonsai growing, I guess, nursery that all the guy does is grow trees in the ground, and take a look at some black pines to choose from that have been in the ground for close to 10 to 15 years from what I understand. And there's some pretty magnificent rough stock that's in the ground. I saw some that came out of there last year, and we're talking about 4.5 inch, 5 inch trunks on these black pines. So I'm hoping that I'll have the opportunity to pick one of those to use and work with from here on out. Because if you've noticed, my collection's kind of more geared towards larger trees. I just think that they have a more profound impact. Not to knock any other size tree out there, because I've had some mames that had very, very influential and impactful feelings and looks to them as well. I've just decided, I'm young, I'm spry, I have the opportunity. What caught me in originally were these big trees that really are awe-inspiring, and they just look like they're thousands of years old. So that's kind of what I'm gearing my collection towards now. Now maybe 30 years from now, when I start getting older and can't manage those type of trees, then yeah, I'll probably end up toning it down a little bit, so I can have something that's more manageable. But for right now, that's what I'm going for. So a black pine, I'm going to be getting a black pine. If you've noticed also, that large trident maple that I was styling is gone. It was not mine to begin with. It was one that was at the nursery that John had asked me, please take this home and do some styling on it. If you want to shoot a video, great. So I did. I am going to be getting at this location as well a large trident maple. And when I say large trident maple, something along that caliber hopefully I'll be able to find, or something with a decent trunk on it. Of course, the hornbeam's gone as well. I had to do that in order to get these other ones that I'm wanting to focus on. These large trunked elms, like the one you see out there. Large trunk trident maple. I'm going to have about 4 or 5 tridents, and I did that intentionally because I've got several different sizes and several different ones that are kind of, I guess you could say, different styles. I got the informal upright, that's the small to medium is what I'm going to call it, that does the crazy curve. I've got the formal upright one, which is the nursery tree that I'm going to continue my series on with that one. And then the one I did my first video on, that one will always be with me as well. But I want a large one. I want one that's got really, really a presence about it. And it may take a long time to develop as well, but we're going to see what we can find out there as well. The Stewartia, I have always wanted a Stewartia, and when I had the opportunity to attain the one that you saw out there on the bench, I couldn't resist it. I had to do it. So I had to make some sacrifices with some trees I had currently that I really didn't want to get rid of, but in order to kind of gear myself towards the things that I'm after and I'm interested, I want some flowering and fruiting species that have some 3 to 4 season interest, I want to still do the pines, and I wanted to focus most of my energy towards the maples and the pine, or the elms. I'm sorry, maples and elms. So I'm gearing myself that way. I'm not trying to narrow my horizons and not be able to expand my horizons on all these other different species. I just decided that these were the ones for me, and these are the ones I want to focus on at the moment and throughout my hobby. So I want to thank you guys for watching. I'm sorry to some that's probably very boring, too much information, didn't want to know it, but I just felt that I needed to put a video out there like this so you folks could understand my beginnings and where I came from and how I learned how to do the bonsai as a hobby, and let you know that you can do it as well. If you don't have the opportunities that some get, there are ways about going and doing it and pursuing it at a high level. So thank you for watching, and Merry Christmas to everybody. We'll see you on the next one.